presented by the following students. Economic growth and expanded logistic networks increase high sugar goods consumption, challenging social planners. Externalities occur when a third party is impacted by the production or consumption of a good. They are regarded as a market failure as they cause the market economy to arrive at an outcome in which efficiency is not maximised. It is therefore seen as an economically optimal decision to correct externalities wherever feasible. The overconsumption of sugar-sweetened beverages, SSBs, has been found to cause a variety of negative health effects in its drinkers. High blood sugar was estimated by WHO as being the third largest cause of preventable deaths in the world, with approximately 3.4 million people dying annually due to it, in their 2009 study on the matter. Consumption of SSBs is a major contributor of this, with it being the biggest source of added sugar people consume in many countries. WHO study also listed obesity as being the fifth largest cause of preventable deaths, with it directly causing 2.8 million casualties annually. There has been strong links between their consumption of SSBs and obesity, as they are not only calorie dense, but also provide low levels of satiation due to the sugars included being simple carbohydrates, which leads to overconsumption. Obesity is a risk factor for heart disease and even certain types of cancer, both of which can require extremely expensive medications and surgeries to treat. This stresses health systems, particularly in countries with socialised healthcare, such as the NHS in the UK. Ill health affects people's ability to participate in the labour force, further reducing economic efficiency. Death causes negative utility to third parties, as deceased family and friends are likely to be greatly affected by this. The economy will lose a consumer as well as a productive worker if the person dies prematurely during their working years. Overconsumption of SSBs has also been linked to the emergence of type 2 diabetes in people due to the sugar raising the body's glycemic load. This can also put a heavy strain on countries' public healthcare system, as insulin needs to be supplied to those in need, and kidney transplants or even dialysis might be necessary if the kidneys get too damaged from diabetes, which are extremely expensive treatments.
All of these health effects show that SSBs have a negative consumption externality. The drinkers create a social harm from their consumption which they do not need to compensate for themselves. This can be displayed on a graph. The socially optimal equilibrium would occur when the social marginal cost equals the social marginal benefit at E star. However, this is not where the market equilibrium occurs. The consumers only take into account their own personal marginal costs and marginal benefits when making consumption decisions, completely ignoring the negative externalities that society bears from their consumption, leading market equilibrium to take place at EM. Therefore, market equilibrium occurs when the private marginal cost meets the private marginal benefit. There is therefore an overconsumption of SSBs compared to the social optimum of QM minus Q star. The PMC and SMC curves are identical as there are no externalities arising from the production of SSBs. This is also the supply curve. The PMB curve is the same as the demand curve, as it was taken into account by consumers, while the social marginal benefit curve is parallel to the PMB curve but shifted downwards. This is because SMB equals the PMB minus the marginal damage, which is the cost to society from an additional unit consumed. The shaded triangle represents the deadweight loss, which shows the total loss of efficiency that occurs due to the overconsumption of SSBs. Taxes can be used as a price instrument in order to reduce the consumption of SSBs to the optimal level. If the tax paid by consumers is equal to the marginal damage, then the socially optimum output can be reached. The PMC is shifted upwards to a level that it meets the PMB, and the equilibrium is reached at the quantity where consumption is optimal, where the pre-tax SMC meets the SMB. The cost of consumption increases through the tax, and therefore the demand falls in turn. This happens because consumers only take into account their own marginal costs and benefits. An increase in the price through taxation reduces their consumption patterns by internalizing the externality.
Taxation can also be used to alleviate the problem of internalities, which result from time-inconsistent preferences. A person may wish to consume less SSBs early in life if they suffer medical conditions due to overconsumption. Taxation may be able to make private costs consistent over time and thus reduce consumption and maximise the individual's well-being. Taxation of SSBs have become a popular policy in the 21st century, with many national, regional and local governments introducing the practice in some form. Major examples include the UK, France, India, Catalonia and Philadelphia, among many other examples. The tax is typically applied to drinks of low nutritional value in addition to added sugar, as they provide no health benefits at all, unlike drinks such as milk and juices, which have sugar but also have essential nutrients. The tax is typically an excise tax, but in some cases an ad valorem tax. In the case of SSBs, it is unlikely consumers will bear the full brunt of the taxation. The amount demanded changes in accordance with price and is measured by the price elasticity of demand. If SSBs have perfect demand inelasticity, demand is not affected by changes in price. This means the entirety of the tax is passed on to the consumer and demand is not impacted at all. Well, if SSBs have perfectly elastic demand, it'd be infinitely affected by changes in prices. Therefore, the producer has to bear the full burden of the extra tax, but the supply and therefore the amount consumed would fall, as less is supplied by the producers at the price point due to a fall in profitability. Lastly, if SSBs are imperfectly elastic, prices increase for consumers but at a lower rate than during perfect inelasticity, and consumption drops but at a lower rate than with perfect elasticity. This is what is ultimately likely to be the case for SSBs, as they are not a necessary good which would be completely demand elastic, but also do not have perfect substitutes, as people see them as distinct from their competitors such as diet drinks, juices, and water. The pass-through rate of the tax and therefore the elasticity of demand is likely to be impacted by a variety of factors, such as the income of individuals, the availability of close substitutes, preferences of SSBs, and the ease of cross-border shopping.
To reduce overconsumption, the broader the tax instituted, the more likely it is to be effective. Taxing only SSBs may lead to people switching to other unhealthy consumables to get their sugar fix, such as cakes or drinks such as alcohol. Even if this doesn't end up being the case, the consumer may switch to dietary version of soft drinks, which aren't quite as unhealthy as their sugar-filled counterparts, but they are more unhealthy than drinks such as milk or water. A wider tax on all foods with low nutritional value and high sugar content will help reduce the overall issue, as only the healthy alternatives are more attractive cost-wise, like what was implemented in Mexico. In the case of SSBs, the tax could be argued to be regressive, targeting lower-income individuals. The spending per capita of SSBs is higher for lower-income consumers, as found in the data from Nielsen, which shows that households earning between $5,000 to $8,000 consume more than double what households over $100,000 earn. The tax is also paid by the amount of SSBs purchased by an individual and not their income. This means that it affects those with less income more. However, this is only the issue if the demand for SSBs are price inelastic, which is not likely to be the case. Instead, people in lower income groups would switch to healthier, non-taxed alternatives at a higher rate. This is good as lower income individuals are more likely to suffer from obesity and diabetes from the general population, which the tax could help reduce. However, it is difficult to measure the effectiveness of the policy of taxing SSBs for a variety of reasons. If the data is controlled for tax areas that is not measured against the group, it will not be considered in the changes in consumption that would happen over time. If the control group is in a nearby area, it is likely to experience the same shocks causing demand to change, the same as in the tax areas. However, if any significant cross-border shopping does occur between the areas due to the taxation, the results may be heavily skewed. Overestimating the consumption in the control group areas and underestimating the consumption in the tax areas, making the policy seem more effective than it actually is.
Many studies have investigated the pass-through rate of taxes on SSBs. An investigation in the AMG Public Health Journal found that after a tax of 1 cent per ounce of SSBs, Berkeley had a tax pass-through rate of 47% when compared to its controls. While a study in the JAMA comparing the pass-through rate from stores in taxed and untaxed terminals at the Philadelphia airport found an estimated pass-through rate of 55% on average after 2 months. It is clear that the price elasticity of demand for SSB is not perfectly elastic. Studies were concluded to analyze how sales in Berkeley were affected by the tax but were inconclusive. A study by Rogers and Wang, which analyzed Nelson's data, failed to reject the null hypothesis that there was no tangible effects on sales, while a study by Silver concluded that there was a 9.6 reduction in the quantity of SSBs purchased. A study by Crawley and Friswold found that in Berkeley, the pass-through rate of taxes directly corresponded to how far taxed stores were from non-tax areas due to the ease of cross-border shopping. Bollinger and Sexton also found that in stores immediately surrounding the tax areas, sales of SSBs increased from 9 to 14%, which is a large proportion of the decrease in sales of the taxed areas. A study by Fable, which focused on changes in consumptions in Berkeley from low-income individuals and ethnic minorities, found that SSB consumption decreased by 24% and water consumption increased by 37%, which is a sizable change showing high policy effectiveness. Taxes are likely to be more effective in large geographical areas as cross-border shopping would become more difficult, reducing consumption. A sliding scale could be implemented for the tax where the unhealthier the drink is, the more heavily it is taxed, as it can encourage manufacturers to improve the health of their drinks. The tax could also impact all high sugar foods instead of just SSBs to stop people from substituting towards them. A final way to make the policy effective is to use the collected taxes to educate the population about the effects overconsumption of SSBs can have, so consumers can make informed decisions like Mexico did through their successful PSA program. Following an extensive review of college research, we conclude that SSB pose significant health and economic risks. To mitigate the overconsumption of SSB, social planners should adopt a comprehensive mixed strategy of taxation and public education.